We're extremely thrilled to have you all here. I think because we have an adjustment in the schedule this evening, I'm going to introduce our host really for the night, Ross Grossman, who is just epic. And I'm sending a virtual hug to you, Ross Grossman, who is so extraordinary. And he's been such a supporter. He has extensive human resources experience in large and small companies in biotech, pharmaceuticals, and financial services. His particular interest in organizational culture as a driver of performance in mega growth and in organizations undergoing wrenching change. He's an experienced consultant and coach to chief human resource officers and management teams of biotech companies experiencing and anticipating significant growth. His consulting specializes from advising senior management of high growth entrepreneurial companies, particularly those commercializing their first product, culture as a strategic advantage, as a driver of attraction, retention, and performance. He coaches, he develops pragmatic and business-focused HR organizations. His past and current clients include Regeneron, Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, etc. And he's been on boards of trustees at the Keck Graduate Institute, one of the Claremont colleges. He is currently on that board. It's a preeminent university focused on graduate education at the intersection of biotechnology and business. He's a trustee and member of the executive committee. He is on the board of the Center for Excellence in Education, which we all know is extraordinary, and we support extensively. He was senior vice president of human resources at Regeneron. He's a retired chief human resources officer. He has really run the gamut in terms of that. He's been a consistent support, having his MBA from the UCLA Anderson School of Management. And he has his depth and breadth of experiences are all about the betterment of the next generation. He has been so supportive and is readily available, and to have him as part of the RSI family is just a dream come true. And I have never forgotten the day that we met, because he's never been out of my life since. And if you're fortunate enough to know him, your life will change for the better. So I'm going to kick it to him to give the host. But I just want to again have one epic round of applause for Ross Grossman and the most epic RSI year yet in the class of 2021. All of the students, academic staff, everyone from CEE, we're just so excited. Our Eddie and Yolande, our dream team heart and soul assistant director and systems manager. This was an epic feat with millions of time zones and moving parts 24/7 for the last 6 weeks. So with that, I kick it over to you, Ross. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you very much. I wish my mother could be here to hear all that. The only thing that really matters in all of that probably is I'm on the board of CEE, and I was with Regeneron Pharmaceuticals for a long, long time. And I do very much care about the development of young people. So I have mixed feelings about being the person to greet you tonight and to welcome you to this convocation, because this is the first year since 1984 that Joanne DeGennaro, who you've all met virtually, I assume, has not been the person greeting. Joanne has food poisoning, and it's killing her. Not food poisoning isn't killing her; it's killing her not to be able to greet you. But I'm thrilled to be the runner-up and the person who gets to do it. As you probably have figured out by now, when you finish this convocation, you're joining a family of outstanding scientists, technologists, engineers, and mathematicians going back to 1984 when the program first started. So, and I was going to use the word team, and that's a good word, but family is a better word, I think, for what it means to be a Rickoid. So we're proud of you. I hope you're proud of yourselves. And it's a great honor to welcome you to this convocation on behalf of Joanne DeGennaro and the Board of Trustees of the Center for Excellence in Education. Now I'd like to turn it over to Maite, who will take us through what we're going to do tonight.
Thank you so much, Ross. We couldn't have done all of this without the leadership of Dr. Jamie Wells. And I want to say Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we can loudly say that to you. But there were others who helped her, thank God, for the staff. And I want to give a round of applause to Eddie Hu, our assistant director. And the amazing, incomparable, we can't do anything without you, Yolan Gao, systems manager for us. And then let's go to the tutors. Pesho, where are you? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Kathy Liu. Anna Lyons. The out of control Jenny Sendova. And the reasonable, very tall mathematician who keeps us all from losing our minds, John Rickert. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Now we're going to talk about the first week TAs. If they're on, we're going to thank Lucy Kai, Ishan Kahar, and those that worked with you the last week, Annie Liang, Anusha Puri. Let's keep clapping for them. Yunseo Choi, Dimitar Kajarov, Addison Liu, and Kenneth Choi. Thank you, thank you. And no evening is complete without me having the pleasure in a very long time to introduce your counselors back to you and to the rest of the audience here. Elliot Fairchild, Naomi Kenyatta, Sushi Kohli, Angelin Matthew, Shrithi Ramachandran, Eldar, and Kyan. Thank you so much. And tonight you're going to hear, while they all would probably love to talk, we've thrown it over to Shruti. So I will now be quiet.
Thank you so much, Maite. So this is just a few words on behalf of the counselors, but first and more importantly even, none of this would be possible without the incredible support of CE and RSI. So please give another round of applause as a sign of our gratitude to Maite, all of the CE staff, and of course, Dr. Wells, the most epic director of the most epic year of RSI. And of course, a speech from the counselors is meaningless if we don't acknowledge the backbone of RSI 21 in the power couple of Eddie and Yoland. Our gratitude to you two is immense and our love for you is unending. 6 short weeks ago, all of you first logged into the Zoom rooms that would come to encapsulate the experience of RSI 21. And it was as disconcerting for all of you as it was for us. All we knew were your names and the headshots collected by ZE. We know the word of the past year and a half has been unprecedented, but we want to reiterate how amazing you've been through the course of RSI 21 in the most interesting of circumstances. Through our time together, we've grown to know you and love all aspects of you, except for maybe the tendency to go video off, camera off. We see you last page of Zoom attendees. From virtual TARP to spontaneous speedfriending featuring our very own Dr. Wells, from Twin Day to Wacky Olympics, from group bed check and Eddie's roasts to Squat Squad, raviolis for life, your counselors have enjoyed every moment spent with you over Zoom, although we are not sorry for muting some of you and placing you in the waiting room, and are very impressed by the number of power outages we've witnessed during our short time together. In all seriousness, it has, of course, helped that you've all been the most patient and responsible kids, or as Dr. Jenny might say, not the worst disasters we've ever seen. Putting up with technical difficulties and arbitrary rating systems. Personally, I'd rate this summer 5 fire emojis out of a sunglasses emoji. We truly love you all so much, and we thank you for making our job so rewarding. There's not been a single second or hour where we haven't been grateful to be here, and every single one of you has brought us so much joy and happiness, and seeing the way that you've bonded and supported each other is inspiring and heartwarming. Our official role as counselors ends here, but know this, we will always be here to help you in the future in whatever way we can. RSI is an experience that stays with you forever, and we have tried to make sure that for you, this experience has been as positive as possible. At the very least, we know that you've made this true for us. Welcome to our family, a family of love and happiness, of shared terrors and collective victories. These last 6 weeks have been truly amazing, and we hope you never forget all of the friends you've made and the memories you've created during this really special institute. But this is far from goodbye. Your RSI experience has only started. From a tangible point of view, join the alumni Facebook group, which you will be hearing more about soon. But more broadly, our family stretches to every corner of the world, and we'll be with you along every part of your beautiful journey throughout life. Unfortunately, our current situation forbids me from giving you all hugs, so accept this speech and a blob heart emote as a token of my and our gratitude to you for the past whirlwind 6 weeks. We can't wait to see where the future takes you all. Stay safe, joyful, and passionate. Each one of you truly makes this world a better place every day.
Thank you so much. Dr. Wells, back to you.
I just want everyone to know that brutal doesn't begin to describe this entire arduous process. I think the the amount of agony that went into these, the resolution of these has been hours that you can't even imagine. And the jury, with respect to, we'll start with the oral. For the presentations today, the jury wants you to know how brutal today was for them to come to this conclusion. They were impressed by everyone. They wish they could have given to every single person, but it is what it is. So we're going to start with the oral 5 recipients of the most representative, exemplary presentations from today. Our first is Donald DJ Live Oak for discrete Schrodinger bridges. His mentor, Professor Justin Solomon from MIT. Give it a shout out to DJ. Our second, Michelle Park, the search for dark matter through soft unclustered energy patterns of CMS. Her mentors, Professor Christoph Poss and Dr. Chad Freer of MIT. Our third from today, Meenakshi Ambati, inferring biological tasks of fibroblasts using Pareto archetype analysis of single-cell RNA sequencing data. Professor Ruslan Medzitov of Yale School of Medicine is a mentor, as well as Dr. Miri Adler from the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. Our fourth from today's presentations, Amber Luo, a wavelet transform-based peak detection algorithm to assess ribosome pause sites in ribosome profiling data. Mentor, Professor Jean Senek from University of Texas at Austin. And our fifth from the oral presentations today is Frank Liu, Presto, rapid protein mechanical strength prediction with an end-to-end deep learning model. Mentors, Professor Marcus Buehler and Dr. Bo Ni of MIT. So give it up for today. Everyone was incredible. It was really brutal for the deliberations from the committee, and huge round of applause to everyone, and for our final 5 oral presentations. Huge applause. Congratulations. We're going to shift to the written. For our written, Amber Luo, a wavelet transform-based peak detection algorithm to assess ribosome pause sites in ribosome profiling data. Our second written recipient is Ella Wang, assessing light-induced fading of colored art objects via digital visualization techniques. Mentors, Dr. Catherine Schilling and Dean Vincent Wilczynski, Yale University. Our third written recipient, Michelle Park, the search for dark matter through soft unclustered energy patterns at CMS, Professor Christoph Poss and Dr. Chad Freer of MIT. Our fourth for the written, Deepthi Mohanraj, Autoflow, a novel method for assessing minimal residual disease in breast cancer patients by identifying bone marrow disseminated tumor cells through the analysis of flow cytometry data. Professor Louis Chodosh of University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine as her mentor. And our fifth written, Kevin Kong, on the sites of Furstenberg's set in finite fields. Mentors from MIT, Alexander Ortiz, Dr. Alexander Ortiz, Professor David Jerison, Ankur Moitra, and Professor Dr. Tanya Kovanova. Again, thank you, congratulations to everyone, and huge rounds of applause. And I pass it back to you, Dr. Grossman.
Thank you. Now I get to, having represented Joanne DeGennaro, now I get to represent my longtime employer, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. Regeneron, as you know, as you probably know, is a scientist-led biopharmaceutical company that has always, and certainly in my time before anybody knew us, has always taken encouraging the best young scientists to pursue careers in science as one of our callings. That culminated eventually in Regeneron taking on the science talent search from Intel a few years ago when Intel stepped back. So I hope you all know the Regeneron science talent search, and we're going to talk in a minute about everybody applying for that. CEE is a perfect match for Regeneron, and Regeneron's actually a big supporter. What I'd like to do, and I wish we were all in Boston and could do it in person, is on behalf of Regeneron, I'd like to present a $1,000 check to each of the winners of the presentations whose names you just heard. Okay, that's with my Regeneron hat on. So now with my CEE hat on, every time I've done this, and I've done this for the last 3 or 4 years, I turn to the class and I tell them I've had a personal goal from the very beginning that half of the winners of the Regeneron Science Talent Search would come from the RSI class. We've done quite well. We tend to have 20 or 30%. Last year, we had 2 of the 10, including the first place $250,000 winner of the Regeneron Science Talent Search came from the RSI class. So go get them, apply please, and we'll all have our fingers crossed that we can show those folks at Regeneron what the RSI people can do. And with that, I wish you the best. And this is probably the last you're going to hear of me tonight. So good luck and enjoy.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you so much. Congratulations, everybody.
Huge congratulations, and huge congratulations to every single one of the 81. I mean it when I say that. I think it was Dr. John Rickard, he'll chime in, that if any of those in the 90s would not even begin to touch, not to offend any of mine, the level was so high for every single student this year, and every single one of you far exceeded any expectation that could have ever been put on you. You really just, in the context of a difficult year, in the context of an insane level of logistical challenges and internet and life bizarreness, you really rose to the occasion. You excelled epically, as is our theme, but in addition have shown such adaptability, resilience, and these are the greatest awards that you're going to get. And we also are very excited because we have many students, all are exemplary in so many different ways, and we have many who we're expecting will be publishing in the months to come, who are outside of those things. There are limitations to different things people could do in their environments. Hopefully we'll be back together in person someday soon. So you really need to give yourselves a round of applause for every single student here who rose to the millions of challenges that they continuously were confronted with this summer. So huge congratulations. And I really am I'm saying that with such sincerity. I mean, what you've been able to accomplish, it just speaks to the volumes that you're going to achieve moving into the future because of the different hurdles and obstacles that you chose to see opportunity instead of as an obstacle, and you figured out workarounds to endless things, and additionally supported your community. I've never seen such champions for one another, such support, not a competitive, everyone helped any other person at any opportunity in any hour of life. And so it was just a beautiful thing to see. We're going to go and name everyone in the class of 2021. So give a wave. We'll try to do this as quickly as is possible. Avni Uhaja, you can all clap. I think everybody should clap. These tend to be staid events and you deserve it, and everybody deserves enthusiasm. Beksultan Akilbekov. Jack Albright, Mahdi Al Ismail, Nuran Al Yusuf, Meenakshi Ambati, Denise Arakan, Niranjan Baskaran, Max Bertel B. Lindgren, Andres Carranzo Morena, Regan Choi, Youngju Sean Choi, Kevin Kong, Jason Shui, Harsh Deep, Alec DeWolf, Amy Dong, Kieran Dunn, Sia Goyle, Alice Guo, Aziz Hanafi, Caitlin Ho, Zero Ho, Ruba Husami, Reina Ibrahim, Philip Einkov, Palak Jolly, Shreyas Carr, Asmi Kumar, Yoan Lee, Jennifer Liu, Russell Lee, Navan Lim, Manasi Lemay, Alan Lin, James Liu, Frank Yucheng Liu, Stephen Liu, Donald DJ Live Oak, Gabriella Liu, Amber Liu, Anki Lo, Camilla Martinez, Tyler Matsuzaki, Eli Myers, Ashini Modi, Deepthi Mohanraj, Lucas Munzel, Varsha Naga, Comfort Ohajunwa, Dhruv Pai, Michelle Park, Srihari Pillai, Alexander Popescu, Isabella Kwan, Angel Raichev, Aditya Saha, Tyre Satubuldin, Cameron Sharma, Natalie Shell, Ashwin Sivakumar, Samuel Su, Aditya Sood, Yunsin Tam, Abigail Thomas, Risto Todorov, Ege Turan, Sahil Krishna Vazatodil, Aravind Vermurugan Kupasumi, Arya Vikram, Ella Wang, Stephanie Wang, Daniel Jia, Ai Shao, David Yan, Christine Yang, Junkai Yang, Abdul Rahman Zatari, Gary Zahn, Anya Zhang, Richard Zhu. Congratulations, class of 2021. Huge, huge, huge congratulations. And now for the epic staff of the class of 21, Eddie Hu, our assistant director, Yolande Gao, systems manager, the first week professors, Dr. Scott Commoners, Dr. Daniel Lee, Dr. Forrest Michael, Dr. Jason Nielsen, Mr. Lance Rhodes, Dr. Rebecca Rogers, Dr. Christopher Skinner, our phenomenal tutors, Peter Pesho Gaidarov, although they call him Prince Peter now, Prince Peter, Kathy Liu, Anna Lyons, Dr. John Rickard, Dr. Jenny the Great Sendova. Woo! Our epic counselors, Elliot Fairchild, Naomi Kenyatta, Kushi Kohli, Angelin Matthew, Shruti Ravichandran, Eldar Urkumbayev, Kayan, or actually what we call K period Stanford Yang is his new name. Our first week TAs, Lucy Kai, Ishan Kar. Our last week TAs, Dimitar Chakarov, Kenneth Choi, Yunseo Choi, Anne Liang, Addison Liu, and Anusha Puri, our wonderful, wonderful staff. And I want to thank also Ms. Maite Ballestero, Joanne DeJaneiro, Chiki, Michelle King, Kathy Freeman, all of the folks from CEE, the whole board of CEE, everyone at MIT, our sponsors, everyone, our wonderful featured speaker who I grew up with tonight. I'm very excited to see, shout out, and we attended RSI together, which is very exciting. And yeah, Anna's shouting out MIT, but this was just, you're all incredible. I'm going to kick it over to Mark Kantrowitz now. And thank you, thank you, thank you for coming to RSI this summer. I mean, it's life-changing for me and I'll cherish it forever.
Thank you, Dr. Welts. So my name is Mark Kantrowitz, an alumnus from 1984, the first year of RSI. I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees. It is my honor to introduce the distinguished Dr. Aaron Kesselham, MD, JD, MPH. He is a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and a faculty member in the Division of Pharmacoepidemiology. and pharmacoeconomics in the Department of Medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Within the division, Dr. Kesselheim leads the program on regulation, therapeutics, and law, also known as Portal, an interdisciplinary research core focusing on intersections among prescription drugs and medical devices, patient health outcomes, and regulatory practices in the law. Portal conducts research on empirical and normative research in legal, ethical, and policy issues regarding the development, approval, and evidence-based use of drugs, devices, vaccines, procedures, and diagnostics. Particular areas of focus include regulation, intellectual property, and comparative effectiveness. These topics are addressed through a variety of descriptive, qualitative, and quantitative methodologies. Dr. Kesselheim is also a Rickoid. He's an alumnus from 1991. To you, Dr. Kesselheim.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Maite. Thanks, Jamie. It's an honor to be part of the RSI Convocation this year. As Mark mentioned, I was a student at RSI back in 1991, which was the last year that RSI was based in Washington, D.C. before it started its relationship with MIT and moved up to Boston. So I can remember what it was like to be in your position as you sit here today. Well, I should say I'm sure that I was in your position, although to be honest, I don't really remember it, possibly because I had been up all night, too many nights in a row, first finishing my project and then watching the sunrise from the Lincoln Memorial, which was a popular thing to do among Rickoids when I was there. My research that summer involved working at a cancer biology lab at the National Cancer Institute, where I screened the urine of thousands of cancer patients for an advanced marker of metastatic disease called type 4 collagenase. So if anybody in the call feels bad that they had to do their project remotely via Zoom, just remember it could always be worse, because at least you didn't finish every day smelling like urine, at least hopefully. Although I didn't go into laboratory science after my time at RSI, I did learn a number of lessons both that summer and as a member of the CE and RSI family that I want to talk to you about today, and tell you about how I had the chance to use some of them this summer when I was in the middle of a national scientific firestorm related to a new Alzheimer's disease drug called aducanumab, or Aduhelm. One of the broad lessons that you take from RSI is to absorb the legacy of Admiral Rickover, who was a brilliant engineer and was also extremely concerned about the social context in which he worked. He built the US nuclear navy, but he was also anti-war and maintained primary concern about the safety of the reactors that he built, because a radiation leak would have been catastrophic for the sailors and the submarine and the environment. Admiral Rickover, as I'm sure you learned, had notoriously high standards and would not abide by mediocrity or carelessness. He would also not allow himself to be pushed around or influenced by political considerations other than trying to do his job the best he could. When I got to RSI, I remember being overjoyed at finding a community of people who are not only talented, but who took pride in producing high quality work. Hopefully every one of you in your experiences at some of the top research centers in the world saw how the best mathematicians and physicists and computer scientists don't cut corners. They're careful and they pay attention to details. And as I said, I've tried to put these lessons to use in my career. As Mark mentioned, I'm a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, and the research group Portal that I run focuses on medication and evidence. We take data and apply empirical methods to understand how to optimize the way drugs are developed and tested in clinical trials, the implications of FDA decision-making, how drugs are used by patients after approval, and how much drugs cost to society. We then publish that information and push it out to Congress, the FDA, state legislatures, basically anyone who'll listen, and leverage that information to try to change policy in ways that will support patient outcomes and public health goals. Following Admiral Rickover's lead, I founded my research group about a decade ago on the principle that we were going to gather data and follow the science without outside influence. So, for example, no one in my group takes personal money from drug companies. Our independence has helped us score policy victories during both the Obama and the Trump administrations, and our attention to scientific rigor helps us affect change. So, for example, we're now working with the state of Massachusetts to review and evaluate whether drugs referred to us by Mass Health, the state Medicaid program, are excessively priced. Since we started our work, dozens of drug companies have folded and given important discounts to Mass Health, rather than subject themselves to our scientific economic review. Those discounts allow Mass Health to offer more services to more people rather than break its budget paying unnecessary prices for drugs. This summer, I faced a scientific challenge that Admiral Rickover would have loved. Since 2015, I've been a member of the FDA's Peripheral and Central Nervous System Advisory Committee, a group of outside experts empaneled to provide outside input on controversial issues facing the agency. In November, we were brought the case of aducanumab, a monoclonal antibody that targeted amyloid plaques, which are protein deposits found in the brain of many people with Alzheimer's disease. The drug had been tested in 2 identically designed randomized controlled trials that were analyzed together at their halfway point and found to have no impact on the decline in patients' cognitive function. However, after the trials were closed and the drug manufacturer realized that if you analyze the 2 trials separately, in the high dose arm of one of the trials, there was a small but statistically significant slowing in the progress of the disease after 18 months of therapy. In the other identically designed trial, there was no effect. Actually, the placebo arm did better, but it wasn't significant. The manufacturer then worked with the FDA to try to figure out why the positive trial was correct and the negative trial was incorrect. For example, they said that by the luck of the draw, there were more patients with rapidly progressive Alzheimer's disease in the negative trial. And if you didn't count those patients with the worst form of the disease, then that trial would have been positive also. The FDA asked us at the advisory committee meeting, and I swear that this is true, if you discount the negative trial, does the positive trial provide sufficient evidence to approve the drug? By this time, Admiral Rickover's ears would have been steaming. A lot of these explanatory gyrations undermined basic principles of science. For example, going back and reanalyzing trial data like that once you know the results is subject to substantial biases. Among 2 identically designed trials, why is the positive one necessarily the right one? It's impossible to consider the results of one trial without considering the results of the other identically designed one. And of course, it's natural that if you remove the worst performing patients in your clinical trial, that your drug will look better. So we voted that the drug did not have sufficient evidence of effectiveness for approval, that at most the evidence was conflicting and more rigorous scientific investigations were needed to understand whether or not the drug worked. When you add in the fact that about 40% of patients in the 2 trials experienced brain swelling and bleeding as side effects, it was clear to us that this drug shouldn't be approved without more data providing convincing evidence that it worked. Unfortunately, the FDA went ahead and approved the drug over the objection of the statistical reviewers at the FDA and us at the advisory committee. But not only did they approve the drug, they did something even more problematic. They changed the entire premise of the approval. Instead of approving the drug because there was a suggestion in one trial that it mildly slowed cognitive decline, they approved the drug based on the mere fact that it cleared amyloid plaque, arguing that there was a reasonable likelihood that its effect on amyloid would eventually translate into better outcomes. But they had no convincing evidence that this was the case. When should we expect these better outcomes to emerge? In fact, there have been dozens of drugs developed that have targeted amyloid plaques this way without affecting cognitive function, and in some cases have even made it worse. And if you look at the trial of aducanumab, there was not a strong relationship at the individual patient level between changes in cognitive function and changes in amyloid level as a result of the drug. That they would approve the drug because of its effect on amyloid was particularly strange, since the FDA had its own guidance document that indicated that amyloid plaques was not a reliable surrogate for cognitive function. Why did they make the switch? We still don't know, but there are concerns that the FDA caved to outside pressure from the company or from some other political forces. With an approval in hand, the manufacturer set the price of the drug at $56,000 per year. Given how many people have Alzheimer's disease in the United States, if even a reasonable fraction of those people take the drug at that price, the spending on this one drug would be larger than the annual budget of NASA. That left me facing my own dilemma. What should I do in the face of this problematic process and this problematic decision? What would Admiral Rickover do? Well, he'd probably call the FDA commissioner into his office and chew her out, but I didn't really have that option. So what I did was I resigned from the advisory committee to express my concern that the FDA wasn't following basic scientific principles. I wrote a public letter to the Secretary of HHS. I wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, and I got into some pretty difficult public arguments with FDA leadership. I helped bring attention to the issue, and I helped arrange for Congress to hold hearings and to call for investigations into the process. And these efforts from me and from others as well have started to have some impact. For example, the FDA agreed to restrict the initial broad indication in the product's labeling, something that the FDA never does after it approves a drug. We're now working with payers to limit coverage and developing materials to explain all of these problems to patients who might be considering using this drug. I felt like I had to get involved because when the FDA doesn't aim for the gold standard, but allows drugs to get on the market by cutting corners, such as using unreliable surrogates over real clinical data, when it lets political or other outside forces move it away from focusing on the science, it's the patients who suffer. And it's not only the Alzheimer's disease patients who are desperate for new treatments, but are now going to get the choice of an extremely expensive drug with substantial harms and no clear benefits. But it's also all the patients who now start to wonder whether they can trust the FDA to make the right decision about other things, like COVID vaccines. So I would say to you that you may not realize it now, but the experience you had this summer will go far beyond your scientific project, whether it was spinning vials of urine in a centrifuge all day, or identifying the scale of EHR discontinuity like 2021 Rickoid Shreyas Carr did in my research group this year. But by taking part in RSI, you've taken a big step in the process of learning how to value and pursue rigor and quality in science. Sometimes, though, that's not enough. One day when you get the chance, I hope all of you will put the values to work that you talked about and learned about this summer that Admiral Rickover showed by standing up for the proper scientific method, because you understand what's at stake if you don't. Think about the sailors in the nuclear submarine and what Rickover would do to ensure that their safety came first. Take your scientific training and become that kind of a leader in whatever field you decide to pursue. And good luck in that process. And thank you very much for inviting me to chat. I'm happy to have any questions or talk about any of these issues if there's time.
We have time for a few questions because it's not, we're ahead of schedule actually. Does anyone have questions from the audience? I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Is it better or worse than at the start of your career now? And what do you think it would take to make it better in terms of trying to eliminate these undue influences or pressures? What could be, actionable steps that would move the needle?
Yeah, I think it's better. I mean, I think there are a lot of things that are better about it. I think there's a lot more understanding of them. 20 years ago when we were in residency, there was a lot more open, sort of like carelessness about the interactions between physicians and pharmaceutical company representatives. Since then, I think there's been a lot of recognition about the ways that those financial relationships can lead to sort of bias in the way that drugs are prescribed. I think there's a lot of understanding about the need for arm's length agreements or arm's length discussions and for rules to try to make sure that there is fairness and lack of bias in science. So I think that there are ways that it's better, although there are a lot of ways, especially in the last few years, that it has gotten substantially worse. There are a lot of people who sort of have tried to undermine science and undermine the scientific method, and I think that's really dangerous. So I think there are now like huge databases of financial relationships that drug companies have with doctors because there's been such abuse of them in the past, and now there's more transparency and more clarity around that. So that's really good. But I think that everybody does need to be concerned about people trying to undermine science and undermine the scientific method, and try to make sure that you stand up for science and independence wherever it is that you're working.
Another question I ask every distinguished speaker is, if you were sitting now at RSI where they're sitting, what things, a lot of times people at that age think that they need to know every single thing moving forward in their career trajectory, or what kind of life advice, wisdom would you give them in terms of pursuing their passions and having to know or not know what they want to do, and what are your, from a macro level, your biggest picture things that you think should have gone one way, would have preferred doing one direction versus another, or the main themes that you could and impart on them?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that obviously, pursue your passions, because that's, and pursue what you're talented in and pursue what you're great at. But I would also, don't forget to think about the social context in which you work. And some of the most transformative courses I took in college related to the history and sociology of science, where you learn, just how science is influenced by the culture in which it's conducted, and various outside forces that impact on it. And that helped sort of move me into thinking more about intersections between science and medicine and public policy, and that's how I ended up where I was, sort of diverted from working more in basic or translational science in a lab. And so but I think that, if you're going to be, whether you're going to be a physicist or a mathematician or an astronomer, or whatever, I think that, thinking about the social context in which you work, just again, going back to Admiral Rickover, which again, I hope that his shadow is over falls over the summer, just like it used to when we were there. But he really did have a great grasp of not only making sure that the nuclear powered submarine fleet was in the constructed to the highest degree of quality, but what some of the bigger issues were relating to the intersections of science and public policy. And so it's amazing when I go back and look at legal issues around the time, relating to the Bayh-Dole Act and other pieces of statute. It'll be we got this at testimony from Admiral Rickover, and I'm like, Admiral Rickover again, there that guy is. So he is, it is really important not only to pursue your passions, but also to try to understand the bigger picture and the larger context in which you work. So history, sociology, science classes. Also, I think everybody should take a statistics course, because that I think is also something that a lot of people have problems understanding. So if you haven't taken that, then definitely take that as well.
That has been echoed by every math. Dr. Rickard smiling. Pesho gave a statistics one. But it's at least nice that they're so consistent. How about, do you recommend everyone do the MD, JD, MPH thing?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. The more letters after your name, the better. But yeah, so I don't know. So I got the law degree because I got this, again, sort of part of this whole sense. I got this sense that there were all of these, lawyers and non-doctors that were setting public policy that would affect how I was going to take care of my patients. And so I got the law degree, probably naively thinking that would have made a difference. And actually, it has actually been useful, because the research group that I run now has people with training in medicine, people with training in law and business and ethics, and we bring all these different disciplines together to try to solve these issues. So if you have the opportunity to get a combined degree with some other really interesting area like the law, you should definitely take it up.
Any student questions? We have a few minutes. How do you think he would fare today in your in RSI? You think he'd survive this last week, 6 weeks of RSI? What do you think, Aaron?
I definitely wouldn't, definitely not. But it is really amazing to see the level of talent. I mean, Shreyas kind of came into our group already knowing a whole bunch of computer science languages and I'd do machine learning, and we were just like, here, Shreyas, do this, and he was like, all right. And it was unbelievable. So the level of talent today at RSI is far beyond what I was part of. For sure.
We have a question from one of the shapers of that, the molders of that talent, our wonderful tutor, Anna Lyons.
Thanks so much for your talk, and thanks for being here with the students. I was curious, I'm really interested in science communication as well. What was it like writing an opinion piece for the New York Times? And do you think there are any other additional really powerful platforms that emerging scientists should be aware of?
Yeah, so that's something that we focus on a lot of, is trying not only to write our papers and get them published in the New England Journal or wherever, but also to like push them out to policymakers. And so we do take a lot of time trying to fashion the research that we do into an understandable message, and then try to affect policy change. And engaging with lay audiences through the New York Times or whatever is great, and I highly recommend it. And again, you don't have to make a difference by you don't have to, it doesn't have to be the New York Times to make a difference. Like your local paper is a great place to write an op-ed. If you see something out there that bothers you, that where people are not applying the scientific method the right way, or not cutting corners and not sticking to high quality, speak up and write something and get it published in your local paper. And that sometimes those get picked up and become bigger. A lot of people now like to be on Twitter and sort of try to express things through Twitter. We also try to maintain a presence on Twitter as well. That's another way of trying to make your voice heard. So I think that it is not enough just to do really great science. I think that you have to take that science and try to make change by trying to communicate it. So I think that getting in scientific communication, like you talked about, is an incredibly important part of science making a difference with the science that you do. You can do great science, but if it just stays in those journals, then nobody reads it, then it's not as impactful. And so you gotta really make an effort. And so writing op-eds is one way of doing that. Being active on Twitter is another way of doing that. Sort of getting out there and presenting it at conferences and meetings and stuff like that's another way of doing that. So all that stuff is a really important part of the scientific process.
What do you think the outcome with regard to blowback on this Alzheimer's drug is going to be ultimately? Oh
man, I don't think we've hit rock bottom yet in terms of the information emerging on this drug. So I don't think that the FDA is going to withdraw the approval like that. That would take sort of like a meteor hitting Earth level of craziness to happen. So I think we're stuck with this drug. And unfortunately, not only are we stuck with this drug, but by virtue of the FDA approving the drug on the basis of this change in amyloid plaque, now we're going to get a whole bunch of other drugs that the FDA is going to approve, because the FDA, considers precedent, really important to it. And so it's going to approve a whole bunch of other drugs on the basis of changing amyloid also. And so we're going to have all these drugs in the market that change amyloid, and we're not going to know what they do, which patients benefit most from them. The FDA suggested that the company should run a confirmatory trial because we have all these unanswered questions, but it gave the company 9 years to complete that trial. 9 years is a super long time. Like, it's just far too long to try to run any kind of reasonable trial of this. So I think what will happen, one of the next big things that'll happen is Medicare is going to make a decision about coverage for this drug, because right now, and I didn't have time to get into this, but right now the rules in the US allow drug companies to charge whatever they want for new drugs, and then force payers to pay for those drugs, especially public payers like Medicare and Medicaid in many cases. And so there are relatively few strategies that Medicare has to try to not pay for a drug, but it is actually using those strategies in this case to evaluate whether or not it should cover the drug. And I think what's going to happen is that Medicare is going to ultimately put some restrictions on coverage of the drug, like it's going to require the patient to have a PET scan or that shows amyloid, or to be early stage in their disease, so to try to limit the product. But I think unfortunately we're stuck with it right now, and so now it just kind of defaults to patients or to physicians, and some academic medical centers, for example, have said that they're not going to allow their physicians to prescribe the drug. So I think it's going to be kind of at the battle is going to go back, is going to now be at a more of a local level.
I'm going to go to Max in a second, but I just want to follow up because we had a lot of emphasis on bioethics throughout the summer, and this is just what somebody you said was totally a great point. What do you think that the impact of being able to advertise drugs and things, the students aren't unaware. We went through all different forms of, bioethics conversations about case reports to data, procurement and patient, privacy and things like that. But one of the things in our day, well, no, it was well before us, you couldn't advertise a drug, and that's changed tremendously. Do you think if you could get students in the loop on that and why that's been good or bad with regard to the advertising of that, and if that played a part in any capacity of what we're used to with regard to drugs? And I see in the chat, Bioethics Breakfast, if we are doing a final Dr. Wells office hours tomorrow morning, which Yolan said it's going to be, I think 10 is what we settled on, so we'll call it a bioethics brunch. Without food again, but what we're going to brand it as that. But anyway, let me, if you could answer that, then I'll go to Max. But do you think there's a role in that at all with regard to how much people, if you could speak to the evolution of knowing, even the general public, even knowing about different drugs and where we are now? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that pharmaceutical advertising is a really important issue and a really important bioethical issue. And in the case of aducanumab, for example, there's a website that Biogen sponsors in which you can diagnose yourself with mild cognitive impairment. And you take a 6-question quiz that asks things like, have you ever misplaced your keys? Have you ever, forgotten something that you were trying to remember, or had trouble remembering the name of someone? And to be honest, if you answered no to a lot of the questions, you might be concerned that you might not be human, actually. And what happens is that after you take this quiz, you're encouraged to go talk to your doctor about whether or not you might have mild cognitive impairment, which is then leads to a discussion about whether or not there are drugs for this kind of condition. Of course, now there is a very expensive drug for it. And so, this kind of advertising is extremely problematic. The only, people may not know this, the only 2 countries in the world that allow unfettered direct-to-consumer advertising of prescription drugs are the United States and New Zealand. So we are in a rare company in allowing this, and you see it doesn't, people, you see the drug company advertisements all the time, and the reason you see those advertisements is because they effectively drive prescribing. They lead patients to have conversations with their doctors about the drugs, and lead people to actually prescribe the drugs that are advertised. And again, there are good things. It's not all bad. There are cases, there have been reports, describing how advertising of disease or drugs for diseases that are stigmatized, sometimes like depression or things like that, can lead to conversations that may not have, that physicians and patients may not have had, and that can lead to positive outcomes. But for me, at least, the negative outcomes of disease mongering, making people think they have diseases that they don't have, pushing drugs that are expensive, that don't offer better benefits over cheaper or generic drugs that are available that don't advertise. Those are really problematic outcomes as well. And so I think that we can get the positives. I think that we can try to destigmatize conditions and try to improve care of patients with those conditions without the need to go through this process of advertising drugs. Unfortunately, the way that the Supreme Court is right now, it'd be very hard to legally restrict prescription drug advertising in any way. So I think we're stuck with it, even though it is a problem.
We're going to rapid fire Max and Richard, and then we have to move on in the program, but it's just everything you're saying is so fascinating. Max?
Thank you. So this is kind of a broad question, but maybe there are some at least simple answers to it. Are there any changes you'd want to see made to the FDA and the drug approval process to prevent situations like this from happening in the future?
Yeah, great. Okay, Richard?
My question was, are there any kind of other prominent bioethics issues that your kind of group tackles apart from kind of drug approval and efficacy?
Sure. Okay. So first off, changes to the FDA approval process. Absolutely, there are a lot of there are changes that are needed. I mean, I think that I think that for the FDA in most cases makes the right decision. And there are a lot of really good scientists at the FDA, and they work really hard. And it is a very challenging job, and there are a lot of very challenging decisions that need to be made. And that's why I think it's important that when the FDA makes a bad decision and uses a bad process, as in the aducanumab case, that we need to understand what went wrong, so that things like this don't happen again. And one of the most egregious parts of this was this accelerated approval pathway that the FDA fell back on after they got their unanimous vote in the advisory committee that the drug was not very convincing in terms of its clinical evidence. The FDA changed the premise and decided to approve it based on this surrogate marker. So I think that things like that, like those last minute changes, those should not be allowed. I mean, I think that if you're going to approve something through the accelerated approval pathway, it's something that you should decide on before you run your pivotal trials, so that you're not in the position of falling back on the accelerated approval pathway as a backup. And I think another major issue that needs attention is the fact that most of the FDA's power comes before the drug is approved. After the drug is approved, the FDA's ability to require companies to do studies on approved drugs or change labeling when those studies are negative is substantially less. So I think we need to balance the power a little bit more to give the FDA more authority to make changes to drugs and to analyze drugs after the drug is approved. Right now, all of the FDA's authority basically is holding out the carrot of drug approval before and then the FDA has a lot less resources and attention it pays to the post-approval space. So those are some changes that I think are necessary. In terms of other bioethical issues other than drug approval, yeah. So so we look at things like the role of public funding in drug development, and how most of the most transformative and important drugs that we have emerge from publicly funded science at academic medical centers, and the differing credit that is given to publicly funded research and research at drug companies for the development of new drugs. We think about bioethical issues related to drug pricing and what's a fair price for a drug. How do we ensure that there's adequate incentive for investment and innovation, but on the other hand, not bankrupting the system, paying for drugs that don't have good value. We think about things like, what's the proper use of how do we encourage proper use of drugs and evidence-based use of drugs? How do we communicate that with patients and make sure that patients have proper informed consent when they're taking drugs where they may not know all the risks and benefits of them? So we think about all the different aspects of the drug approval spectrum, and then as Mark mentioned, also do some work looking at devices and diagnostics. There was a whole big issue with COVID diagnostics and the quality of COVID diagnostics, especially in the early stages of the pandemic, when the FDA was letting all of these companies just sell their COVID diagnostics without real rigorous testing of them, and that was a big issue. So yeah, tons of stuff going on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kasselheim. So much food for thought. As we've always said as a theme, use your critical thinking skills. Don't just be spoon-fed information. And there have been incredible developments in drugs that have converted things that were terminal disease to chronic conditions. And there's normally never an all good or all bad scenario. So thank you, Dr. Kasselheim, RSI, Rickoid.
Thank you very much.
You're all now Rickoids.
Right.
And I pass it back to Mark Kantrowitz.
So at the conclusion of RSI each year, participants are asked to vote for the Rickoid of the Year, an award which is given to a student who is recognized by their fellow RSI classmates for their academic acumen and personal demeanor. This year's Rickoid of the Year is Isabella Kwan. And if she'd like to say a few words, please do so.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor. So do you guys still remember the opening convocation? It still feels like yesterday. One Zoom room and 81 of us. For some of y'all, it was the middle of the night. And for me, it was 8 a.m. and I was wearing my RSI t-shirt that was 2 sizes too big. Everyone introduced themselves, except I swear half the time was devoted to the A names. The beginning of something incredible. And today, here we are at the end. In these 6 weeks, we worked together, laughed together, spent time together, whether it was in counselor groups, tutor groups, or as a collective body of the 81 most epic students on the planet, we grew as a group and as people. At opening convocation, we were 81 students. Tonight, we are one family. There were so many priceless memories. Watching inspirational quotes light up when bed check time rolls around, the camp's collective love-hate relationship with Avalon, counselor points rising and falling, nose diving if you're the fair children, meanwhile raviolis stay on top, the RSI talent show and seeing you all excel at not STEM things, culinary delights in the kitchen, working till dawn on the final paper, watching the final symposium and that amazing encore. Don't forget about Dora. The truth is, I've never met a group of people like you all. It's one thing to collect the greatest STEM talent in the world, but it's another to bring together the coolest, kindest, and best students out there. I learned so much from RSI, not just from research, but from you guys. You've made me a better person in every way, and it's been not just a pleasure, but a real honor to be your Discord server admin and Rickoid of the Year. Even though I'm the official Rickoid of the Year, in my mind, everyone's the Rickoid of the Year. As part of the epic RSI 21 group, every last one of you are irreplaceable. And as your dictator, friend, and fellow Rickoid, I promised everyone this as I let you into the Discord. If you need anything, I will be there in a heartbeat. Tonight might be the closing convocation, but with one door that closes, another opens. The door that closes today is the official RSI experience. The one that opens tomorrow is our future, filled with plentiful opportunities, research papers, and friendships that will last forever. Today is not goodbye. Today we turn the page and walk towards the future together. I have one final request. Keep our RSI family alive. The Discord server isn't going anywhere, and if you're not active there, now might be a good time to start. Even as we go into our final year of high school and life throws curveball after curveball at us, we will always have each other. We just have to put in the work. If we keep our memories, friendships, and love for one another in our hearts, time and space are nothing to fear. Stay safe, stay well, and stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will be sending you the medal. It is a replica of Admiral Rickover's 2 congressional medals. And Mrs. D loves to tell the story. The photo on here is not, it was not current at the time. It was from like the 1950s because he looked good. And Mark can attest to this because he's heard it a lot of times. Now, welcome. You are officially alumni. Take it away, Mark.
So we're going to show you a 60-minute segment from 1984, the first year of RSI, when the Admiral was interviewed by Diane Sawyer. And this will give you a sense of why the alumni are called Rickoids. And it'll also give you a feeling for the man, the Admiral, always focused on doing the right thing. And I'm also reminded of one of our speakers was Admiral Grace Hopper. And I remember from that speech that she told some stories of her own about how it's easier to apologize than to ask permission. And that's one of the best things about the Admiral in this 60-minute segment is you get to hear a few of those stories. I've been serving on the commissioning committee for USS 795, a new nuclear submarine, the second one that's going to be named after the Admiral. And one of the benefits of serving on that committee is I get to hear many more stories about the Admiral and his interviewing methods. So without further ado, let's roll the footage.
Perhaps the question should be, what should be the role of educated or intellectual people in the United States? Now, does that...
In an interview or on a ship, Hyman George Rickover likes to take command. Even at 84, the Admiral can inspect a submarine with the agility of an ensign. In Rickover's mind, these are his submarines. He designed the reactor, he trained the men. 1 out of 4 admirals commanding ships today was trained by Rickover. His nuclear empire became known as Rickover's Navy, and it ran solely Rickover's way. What he got done was this: the Nautilus, the world's first nuclear-powered submarine, launched in 1952, the machine that would change military strategy forever. This submarine could stay underwater for months. Rickover stunned the world by building the Nautilus from scratch in only 5 years, leaving the Russians far behind. Many people called him the best engineer the Navy ever had. Today, there are 141 ships in the nuclear fleet. But once, there was just the man and his obsession with science, not saluting, with engineering, not command.
What is at the heart of leadership? Is it in personality, charisma?
No. For example, I have the charisma of a chipmunk. So what the hell difference does that make?
It was certainly not his personality that won Rickover 3 Distinguished Service Medals, and to celebrate the Nautilus, a ticker-tape parade through the streets of New York, a long way from the tiny town in Russian-occupied Poland where Rickover was born, the son of a tailor. A long way for the boy who landed at Ellis Island at the age of 6 and grew up in a ghetto in Chicago, and won an appointment to the Naval Academy at Annapolis. He was terrified he wouldn't make it.
It was in becoming an officer and going to a ship and seeing the mature adult attitude in which one was treated as compared to that lousy boys' school.
Today, that lousy boys' school has a science building named for Rickover. Inside, models of his submarines and the testing devices he invented. Rickover's science and a Rickover superstition, it's supposed to be good luck to rub his nose, the one on the statue. And how about the Rickover stories? The admirals who run the Naval Academy remember being grilled by Rickover when they applied for admission to his nuclear sub-school.
One young man there came in with long hair, and you told him he had to choose between the long hair and the program. And he walked out and said, "My girlfriend likes this ponytail."
Fine, that was the end. The little son of a bitch should have got them, cut it all off and gotten a wig.
I heard that you had people come in and you sat them down in chairs in which some of the legs were shorter than the others.
No, not only 2. I saw 6 inches from the two front, only 2. And it was difficult because it was a shiny chair and they kept on sliding off. So they had to maintain their wits about them while they were asked these questions while they were sliding off the chair.
And what about those that you brought in and made stand in the broom closet?
Well, they came in, they gave stupid answers, so I thought I'd give them a chance to think. I'd put them in there for a couple hours, 3 hours, and I gave them plenty of time to think.
But what were you trying to do with these young men who came into you?
I was trying to draw out of them what they had potentially in them.
A young ensign from Georgia eluded the broom closet, but couldn't escape Rickover's demand for excellence.
Did you hate him a little?
There were a few times, yeah, when I hated him. Because he demanded more from me than I thought I could deliver.
James Earl Carter hated him, revered him, and became his commander-in-chief.
Is anyone his boss?
I never really felt like his boss, although he would say that I was. I'm not sure that he ever acknowledged it really deep down in his heart.
Carter and 4 other presidents would intervene to keep Rickover on active duty 20 years past his retirement date. What Rickover admits to caring about is American education. Over the years, he has given $100,000 of his own money to educational projects. And now he's raised some $200,000 for a foundation of his own, the Rickover Science Institute, which brings 60 gifted students to Washington each summer for intensive study.
What is it that you think the gifted children most need that they're not getting in the school
They need
system?
the exercise of their brains. They need not to be kept in apathy, not to let their parents run around and have a good time. The primary function of parents in this world to raise their children to the best of their ability. They're not doing it.
Okay, well, I agree with you in that we need to invest more money.
Well, thank you very much.
And sometimes the educator can't resist being the admiral again.
And they seem to be
You
increasing.
better talk up because the audience is not hearing what you're saying. Start all over again and talk up. Yeah, use all your equipment. Come on.
If Rickover is hard on parents and kids, he's also hard on an institution he fathered, civilian nuclear power. This is the plant at 3 Mile Island. Rickover built the first civilian nuclear plant. He says nuclear energy will be necessary for the future because Americans are squandering their resources. But he worries that the plant technicians are not being properly supervised, and he worries where the nuclear discovery will lead.
One of the most remarkable things that he ever told me was when we were together on the submarine, and he said that he wished that a nuclear explosive had never been evolved. And then he said, I wish that nuclear power had never been discovered. And I said, Admiral, this is your life. He said, I would forego all the accomplishments of my life, and I would be willing to forego all the advantages of nuclear power to propel ships, for medical research, and for every other purpose of generating electric power, if we could have avoided the evolution of atomic explosives.
Rickover walks 4 miles a day and works 11 hours, arranging fundraisers and speeches. Here with the director of his foundation, Joanne DeGennaro.
That's why we're Rickoids.
Jamie, you get the last word.
I'm giving everybody an enormous virtual global epic hug. That's number one. Number two, I'm trying left and right to coerce, cajole, see Maite to let us do something where we're in person someday soon. Our goal is Miss D's winter party in December, but you know, the state of things as you're used to, we don't know yet with regard to that, but definitely when is the, Maite, when is the Boston anniversary? That everybody should set their sights on. When is that?
Set
Is it
your
20
sights. We will do that in 2023 in the fall. That marks 40 years of CEE. And the holiday party's planned for December 18th. We need everybody to get the shot who has not. Convince, cajole, do whatever it takes. Thank you all for joining our virtual program, for being epic. I can't wait till I meet you in person. 2 years of not meeting people in person. We will do what we can, and certainly December 18th is what's planned right now. But if you all live near each other, we know in the DC metro area, some folks are going to come over to the office, and we'll work that out so they can safely come and visit us at the office. It'll give us an opportunity to meet some people. If you visit any colleges, not that you would in our area, but in case you happen to, let me know, and do anything you can to stay in touch. I'm on the Discord, I'm learning, and you all can teach me. Thank you, Isabella, for setting that up, for having the rules, and for being amazing, all of you. And I will bid you a good night. Dr. Wells, Mark, Aaron, Ross, everybody, thank you. And I know Mrs. D is just heartsick for not having been with you, but you will see her, you will meet her, and you saw her during our opening. So I think she would be so proud of her alumni pitching in and the trustees.
I'm going to be unrelenting about maybe not every hour or every 5 minutes, like I've encouraged you all to contact all the distinguished lecturers throughout the RSI, but I've decided I have 81 new life coaches for myself. You're now part of, you have so much wisdom in so many different arenas. So you're all MVP. That's been a running joke. Pesha was one of the first MVPs. but he knows that can change every hour. So he has to, everybody keeps setting the bar up. But I'm going to be unrelenting about trying to come up with opportunities. Just keep the communication going. You're still all on the RSI website. If you're going to different colleges, let everybody know, because I guarantee you we'd all love to go. Because even if we can get pockets of folks, it would just be really nice to get to meet.
Awesome.
If you're going to different people's states. So keep the communication open.
I can't emphasize this enough. Enter, if you're eligible, the Regeneron Science Talent Search. It is, the top prize is amazing. Even the top 40 get significant scholarships. And it's the only experience that I remember that is anything at all like the feeling of RSI. It's shorter and it's intense, but it's got some of the same characteristics of RSI. So definitely apply. RSI Rickoids have a strong track record of winning getting into the top 40 and winning scholarships. So can't emphasize that enough.
We all know, I still contend that every single one of any of the schools that these 81 go to will be lucky to have them.
Exactly.
Luckier to have them than even the reverse, because they are just the best. This has just been something I will never forget. I mean, the science and your brilliant minds are here, but your phenomenal personality traits, every single one of you is so special and unique and has so much to offer in so many different ways. And I laugh so much at, I mean, there's just been so much hilarity and funny moments that outshine everything and are even more here. Your science is only going to take off, but your humanity is like through the roof and going to reverberate in so many ways, and science will just be your tool to continue to improve your communities, yourself, and everyone around you. So your parents should be proud. Any students want to say anything, final thoughts, shout them out. I'll let you take us out, the epic class of 2021.
So thank you everyone for a great year.
We should all sing the RSI anthem or what?
Oh, okay. Can you put it up? Can someone?
Nevin.
Wait, Devon, can you give us the lyrics?
Yeah. 81 hearts and minds, united in our love for science, gathered at MIT, we may never share a room, we're still together on Zoom, at our own Rickover, since we home forever. RSI, Research Science Institute, forward together, whatever the weather. Classes first week. Neighbors, memories to keep. Professors came to tell. Maths, legs, and health. Experts of the field. Knowledge we can wield. For the betterment of all mankind. But that is the goal of science. Science is our middle domain. Forward together, whatever the weather. Group together we work. Think with the leaders that children now use. Phrases and squishies, readers raviolis, red hot peppers, listen to your elders, and Nolan have mercy on us all. Science is our middle domain. RSI. together, whatever the weather. RSI, 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 Research Science Institute, RSI, RSI, oh, we're together, whatever the weather. Dr. Wells and Mrs. D, Nolan, Eddie, and my team, counselors and the tutors, professors and lecturers, points and friends, everyone else and this song I sang. Thank you for this great program.
Woo! Yeah, Nevin.
Go!
That was awesome, Nevin.
You guys are singing along, and thank you guys for being just awesome people in general. It's been a real privilege and honor to know each and every one of you, and I'm so lucky, really.
Back at you, Nevin.
Oh, I don't, who, thank you, everybody, unless students have anything left to shout out.
Thank you so much to the students for making all the staff's summer so eventful and memorable. And I hope that RSI has been really fun and transformative for you. And yeah, I think hopefully our paths will cross in the future.